success is relative, right? When, I take a more fine dining approach to a lot of it. A lot of my background is fine dining. And when you're trying to create a restaurant from your own revenue, that's fine dining, and you don't have massive backers, like I could take in massive backers to throw a lot of money at this and then start to go from there. But I think, we don't get into this industry to be rich. We get into this industry because we care about something.
Right.
We're trying to forge legacy over currency. And I think that's one of those important points.
This episode made possible by Restaurant Systems Pro. With excitement, allow me to introduce you today's guest back on the show for a second time, chef, author, owner of Aatma Pop-Up and the Farmer's Dinner, Chef Keith Sarasin. Keith, my man, are you feeling unstoppable today?
I'm feeling super unstoppable. Great intro. Thank you,
man. Dude, I'm psyched to have you here. Whenever I have a repeat guest in the show, I make it a point to listen to the first interview to wrap my mind around the conversation so we can pick up where we left off. When I last spoke to you, it was 2020, 4 years ago. You had published 3 books. You just got out of a restaurant partnership where we'll get into that. You are focusing on getting back to writing and to focus on your pop-ups, and life was good. You were an amazing guest. Honestly, I really enjoyed the conversation, which is why you're back. But to help our listeners understand where you are today, just real quick, paint the picture of what your portfolio looks like today.
Yeah, so, 2020 was a lifetime ago, right? So basically now I have a pop-up series called Aatma. It's the Hindi word for soul. We'll get into that. Still doing the Farmer's Dinner. Year 13 is coming up, which is crazy. And then Chris Viaud and I started From the Field Catering as well. And so those are the 3 entities I do a ton of stuff with and then keep writing. So it's a busy world.
So out of all the things you have, your channels of revenue, you're making money from books, you're making money from your pop-ups too, and you're making money from catering. Is there anything else that I'm missing?
Yeah, that's about it. Yeah.
Where is the majority of your revenue coming from?
I would say catering has been really good. As Chris and I joined forces, obviously Chris is a massive talent and huge fish in this pond. That helped us from a catering aspect. The money in catering's better.
Right.
Like just much better, but it's also more stressful.
Right.
Books has always been solid. The latest book deal that I just penned was the biggest book deal I've ever done in my career. It was bigger than all. Thank you. It was bigger than all of the books combined.
How big?
$1 million. No, I'm just kidding. No. It was just under six figures.
6 figures.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Just under 6 figures. Altogether between the pop-ups, the catering, the book sales, on average, ballpark, what are you grossing?
Yeah. So all 3 entities are different. So Farmer's Dinner, we've broken 6 figures every year for the last 3-4 years, which has been good. Net is harder, right, as you have so much labor. We broke 6 figures in catering after year 1, which was incredible. And then pop-ups, specifically Aatma, we do maybe 1 a month. So we're not close to 6 figures yet there.
Okay.
It's more testing the waters there. And then book sales are residual, hit and miss, depending on what we're doing. I'm lucky I work with HarperCollins, and they're amazing and huge. So I don't know why they chose me, but I got lucky.
You're pretty great, man.
Thanks.
But you're making a living, right? You're getting by.
Yeah.
And one thing I want to preface this, like when I started this podcast, what inspired me to start this was I was listening to these tech entrepreneurs and digital space entrepreneurs sharing their entrepreneurial journeys, talking about how they've made their millions of dollars. And when I started this podcast, I was like, I want to do the same thing. I was very naive. You don't get involved in the restaurant industry to make millions of dollars. You can. And I'm not saying you're a bad person if you do, but I kind of chose along the way to respect that success is relative in this industry, and that I think that if I'm going to do my job, I think I need to educate people on if you're chasing money in this industry, unless you're the 1% of the 1%, you're going to be disappointed. So, what are your thoughts on that statement?
Yeah, I think you nailed it with success is relative,
Yeah.
right? When, I take a more fine dining approach to a lot of it, and a lot of my background is fine dining. And when you're trying to create a restaurant from your own revenue, that's fine dining, and you don't have massive backers, like I could take in massive backers to throw a lot of money at this and then start to go from there. But I think, we don't get into this industry to be rich. We get into this industry because we care about something.
Right.
We're trying to forge a legacy over currency. And I think that's one of those important points. There are ways to make money in this.
Yeah.
The QSR space is rocking right now.
Right.
And it's just growing.
Right.
Way more than the fine dining sector.
Yeah, I think we're going to get into this. I do want to start off with, I do want to say, if you want to pick up and listen to the first conversation, it's episode 742. So maybe you want to hit pause now, listen to Keith's story up to this point. We're going to pick up where we left off, but first get that motivational, inspirational ball rolling with a success quarter mantra. What do you have for us? I wonder if it's what you shared last time.
Oh, I remember last time was Maya Angelou, right?
Yep.
So I can't go back to that, even though that one's great.
Good memory.
There's a quote in Hamlet where he says, "Blow wind, come wrath, at least we'll die with the harness off our back."
Okay.
And I think about that quote when life gets crazy. It's kind of like, if you do everything to stand, the last thing you can do is stand. So at least we'll die with the harness off our back.
What is the harness in that quote? Like, what is that? What's the word I'm looking for? Like,
yeah, what
figuratively or like?
I think it's about, at least we're gonna have no regrets. Like a harness, like can lift us up and keep us safe, but a harness can also hold us back, right? And I think in the way
make you feel safe, make you feel right.
Yeah, at least we'll face this without any shackles, is kind of the way that I think about that quote for me.
Yeah, man, I love that. And it kind of rings true to me. I mean, last night I was sharing with you like my own challenges, like trying to figure out how I'm going to keep the gas in my camper to do the job I have to do, and like literally running out of propane and thinking, crap, my lines are going to freeze. I gotta, like, in that moment, I checked my checking account. I got paid $72, which was just enough to keep going. And to in that moment, I was so happy, because it's tough, but like when you're doing the right thing and as long as you can survive, you're in that, like, you have that harness to keep you to feel safe and right. So great way to get this thing started. It's resonating with me right now. 4 years ago, what has happened? Like, real quick, just 3 more books, started a new pop-up, working on a documentary. You started your catering business. You reignited an old flame in your business partner. What am I missing?
You're missing all the stuff that social media doesn't see, just the personal growth, right? Getting over the loss of my mom. Well, you never get over it, right? You learn to find a new normal. So the personal grief of my mom passing away, and then time healing those wounds. Like, time is this amazing construct that does allow us to heal, right? And so I can never be my best for these companies unless I'm the best version of me. And that's just hard sometimes, right? Like, we wake up and sometimes we just don't want to get out of bed.
Right.
So I think the personal growth is the thing that doesn't get displayed enough. Make sense?
Yeah. So have you grown personally in the past 4 years, or are you struggling?
No, I'm just kidding. No, I have. And I'm very open about my personal struggles because I don't want to be this disingenuous human being. And I've been in therapy for 8 years. I've had the same therapist for 8 years, which I want to say to anyone who's ever considered therapy, once you find somebody that you're even just a small bit comfortable with, stick with it. Therapy gets incredibly useful when that person can now predict your patterns and see your past and all of that stuff. So thanks to therapy, through a lot of work, like hard freaking work that I'm still doing right now, really, I think I'm a much better version of me.
Awesome. I'm so happy to hear that, man. So, I mean, obviously this is a business podcast. I know we're going to get philosophical in today's conversation. We just, in the past half hour of being here setting up, we could have recorded a podcast. In terms of your business, three additional books. The most recent book you said was bigger deal than the previous 4 combined. What are you doing differently to get more traction with your publications?
Yeah, I think a lot of this is trust, right? I've worked with HarperCollins. So I originally started working with Cider Mill. Cider Mill Press was out of Kennebunkport, Maine. And when that relationship started, I was very afraid. Like my first book, The Perfect Turkey, I didn't want to write about turkey, but I wanted to write. And I always had a passion for writing. And as I started to grow, they started to see that I could deliver on time. I could deliver before deadlines. I was constantly communicating with them. When they asked something, I stopped what I was doing to make sure that I made this important and relevant because I knew I had one shot. A lot of us get one chance in this world. I'm not the most talented chef. I'm not the best looking. I'm up there. No.
You're pretty cute, man.
Well, thank you. Well, it's the chai talking, right? Well,
keep feeding me that chai. I'll say anything about you.
But I knew that I had one chance. And that one chance allowed me to go further and further. And so they would keep asking me, hey, what about this book? And what about this?
So, but it sounds like when you started, you were just kind of starting. And I think this happens in the restaurant industry and anything. You start with a general direction, and then over time you kind of hone your focus. And it sounds like from at least my observation, what you're writing about now seems to be the thing that you're most excited about. Do you think that is manifesting in your success?
Yes, most definitely. I think when you start off writing The Perfect Turkey, I didn't have a passion for turkey. I had a passion for writing, and I knew this was a foot in the door. Now, my next book that comes out next year, which I think we're going to break the news here, which is pretty exciting.
Sweet.
It is all about India. The foreword was written by my teacher, Dr. Kurush Dalal, who is just more brilliant than I could ever be. We have wonderful recipes from chefs all over the world in there, including a lot of mine, which is just incredible. Pictures from India. But the thing that I'm the most passionate about in this book is finally HarperCollins allowed me to start writing. They allowed me not to just write a cookbook, but a piece of my soul. I talk about the loss of my mom. I talk about the beginning of my childhood and how there's a scarlet thread that led me to understand grief through the context of food. And so I can't even put into words how excited and emotional I am to put this book into people's hands.
How do you understand grief through the context of food?
Great question. And that it's funny because it leads a good segue into the documentary that we're doing, which is really a lot about that. Grief is funny because in the West, we don't talk about it, right? When somebody passes away, in the context of food, you'll go and there'll be a funeral and maybe there's a get together after. But as you start to study food from the subcontinent, specifically around South Asia, grief is looked at very different based off of belief systems. Right before we were recording this, I told you about the story of the monk in Bhutan. And he said, since we meditate on death every morning, when death finally comes, we greet him as a friend.
Why?
I think mostly because we look at death as this finality, as this thing that's so jarring that when my mom died, it left this void that I didn't even know could exist, right? It's this empty shell of a space where only my mom could fit. And now it's about rebuilding that. And through the context of food, to bring it back there, since that's what we're here to talk about, I think a lot of times when we think about food addiction, when we think about binging, there's a clear reason I chose food, right? Like food was a comfort. When we celebrate our birthday, we have cake. When we mourn, we have things. Like all these rituals around food teach us these various lessons through grief.
That's deep, man. It might be too deep for me. I'm trying to keep up. So you're tying grief to this idea of like vulnerability, tying that to food, the dopamine hits we get from food, using food as a way to fill a void. The void you were feeling in your life was the loss of your mother, and there's a connection, the relative parallel track there where we go to things when we feel grief to fill that hole. So for you, the hole that was being filled was your mother. How do you tie that to your relationship with food in the books? I guess I'm curious about.
Yeah. So let's take two polarizing examples. Example one would be, I make really good scrambled eggs, right? Like, I'm sure you do too, right? It's not a hard thing to do by nature. And my mother was a horrific cook. God bless her. A lot of the reason I got into this was because I wanted to be able to help and feel useful in a time where it was just her and I growing up. So my mother's scrambled eggs and toast are a memory that I can taste in my mind, but I cannot replicate. And when I started studying food from the subcontinent, my first mentor, Indra, would make this dal, simple lentils, right? Like we grew up in a French kitchen, so typically we do lentils one way. The subcontinent does it very differently. And so she would make these lentils, and I would taste it, and it almost tasted like somebody was hugging you. I think everyone listening has a reference point, whether it's a chocolate chip cookie or dal or pizza or anything in their family. What's yours?
Mine is my grandmother's lumpy mashed potatoes, which I love to bring up because I complimented her once for her lumpy mashed potatoes, not realizing that I was insulting her. But to me, first of all, they were buttery and garlicky. Like, what more can you ask for? And potatoes. But it wasn't, reflecting back, it was because I was there in her home at her dinner table. Any kind of potato is good too, but it was just funny because like it was something that wasn't, she was old. She was like 85 years old trying to mash potatoes. Of course they're going to be lumpy, right? But I loved those potatoes and I will never have that back because it was the connection to her.
And that's the beauty of grief. So notice I said beauty of grief because we always associate grief with sadness. I think about that moment of those incredible scrambled eggs and how I long for that one bite. And I also know I can never get it back. But really what grief is, and this is how grief transforms, and food taught me this. Grief is really all the unexpressed love that I couldn't express during that point where she was alive.
Regret.
Yeah, you can't hurt this bad without feeling that much love.
You have to understand what loss is. Or yeah. So with food, in your writing, like how does this, like what are you writing about in this book? I guess I'm curious. Like what does that look like on paper for you?
So it starts with a story of me being this young kid standing in line for government cheese. And I really, when I started writing this, I wanted to put myself back because it's the first memory I have. I remember being ushered out in the cold. My mom was grabbing my hand and we were walking really quick and we went to this church. And this old nun, looked at us as we stood in line, and I had no idea why we were there. And she's like, Jesus loves you. And I remember walking back, and she handed us this cardboard box full of food, and we were walking back home, and I remember saying, if Jesus loved us, wouldn't he hand us money instead? And my mom slaps me in the back of the head, like playfully, and she's like, don't be fresh. I think about that moment of opening that box and being a kid, and the smell of this yeasted, berry-filled donut would kind of permeate the box. I think about the waxy cut of government cheese. If you've ever been real poor and had government cheese before in your life, it's like waxy and super ultra processed. And I remember when she gave it to me, it tasted like chemicals to me. And she's like, well, I like it. It's these stories that had a scarlet thread all the way into my career. And subsequently, when I started finding Indian cuisine, I realized that kid that stood in that line with that puffy red jacket was still that person who was there today.
Okay. So what was happening to you when you found that Indian cuisine?
I think it's funny. I never wanted to like love Indian cuisine. In fact, like even on the old stories, I think I said on the podcast last time, I was averse to it, right? Like I was like, it's spicy. It's this. It doesn't look like the food that we eat. So what was happening to me is it was touching a part of my soul that was the same bite of food that I would have when my mom would cook. And I don't understand why, because I know how food breaks down. I can tell you every aspect of a composition of a dish and why it ignites certain things, but I can't tell you the soul of the food. And I think that's what it was igniting, which made me curious. And ultimately, all exploration begins with curiosity. So
when you're writing this book, are you sharing your journeys about the experiences you have, and do you like take a detour down into like the recipe of that thing that you experienced? Is that like how the book's formatted?
Yeah, so I formatted it through region. I think Indian food in the West is very polarizing, right? People think chicken tikka masala and garlic naan is Indian food. couldn't be further from the truth. Indian food cannot be defined by a dish or even an ingredient. So I wanted to break it down into regions, but through it, there's a lot of stories. So, for instance, when I start talking about Parsi food, I start talking about my teacher who is Parsi and being at one of like his house in the hills in Lonavala in India, where he was cooking these incredible Parsi dishes, dishes like dansak, which is the staple dish in so many Parsi kitchens. And having that moment of being, it's romanticizing it a bit, but when you're in this beautiful house with people who you love so deeply, who are pouring their heart and soul into this, as the rain falls and the smell of the earth, there's this phrase in Hindi called Sonde Sonde Kushbu, and it means like the smell of the earth as the rain hits it. It's magic.
Yeah. So you're using all these experiences, you're letting up this passion, you're using your passion to basically, I mean, if that's not success, I don't know what is. To be able to have the freedom of purpose, the freedom of relationships, to go chase these people, their stories, the relationships you have to their food, and that, you know, to have the time to go do that. But I mean, you have 3 buckets you identified. There's the writing, there's the pop-ups, and then there's the catering. How are you using, I'm assuming that if you could flip a switch tomorrow, you would do nothing but writing, traveling, and going deeper into that. But there's the reality of you need to fuel that with the income to go make the money doing the catering. Pop-ups, are they more revenue generated, or is that more about marketing and promoting your work? Is that more of like a marketing tool for you?
So it depends on the pop-up. Farmer's Dinner is an income source, right? Farmer's Dinner is something that, from a scalability standpoint, I would have to sacrifice a lot of what I love.
Yeah.
So we could take Farmer's Dinner all over New England. We could take it all over America and beyond. And there's companies that have done that and been very successful with it. My passion point is New England.
Okay.
I love New England.
Yeah.
The farmers, the people, everything about it. I love the snow.
It takes getting away from New England for a while to realize, not to say that there aren't other special places in the country, but like it is a special place for sure.
Yeah, ideologically, like I love it. I love a lot of the stuff that I want to do is New England based. Whether even if it's India, we look at Indian food through the lens of what grows in the Northeast. And you see these beautiful parallels, which is how I created signature dishes like from Maine to Mumbai, and things of that nature. But the revenue stream has to come from all of those things. With catering, that's a whole other beast. So having Chris on board and his sister Cassie, who's just a rock star, Marie, all of the employees that we have on that team, they make it so that we can do what we do.
What up, Unstoppable restaurant owners and operators? We have to interrupt today's video to let you know that Restaurant Unstoppable and Restaurant Systems Pro, we're taking our relationship to the next level. Beginning in July of 2024, Fred Langley, CEO of Restaurant Systems Pro, is making himself available once a week in Restaurant Unstoppable Network to answer all of your restaurant systems questions, whether it's the profit margins. He will look at your P&L. Bring your P&L. He will take a look at that. He will dissect it. He will help you find your profit, whether that be through budgeting, inventory management, costing recipe cards, labor, checklists, you name it. He is a master on restaurant systems, and he's making himself available to you. Fred Langley and Restaurant Systems Pro started as a consulting firm, and for over 16 years, they've been helping their clients increase their profit by 10% or more. What are you waiting for? Click the link below to join our Facebook group, Restaurant Unstoppable Network.
You got into good detail our first time around with the tools, the approach to catering, the things that catering, but pop-ups. I was really interested in pop-ups around this time. I have been for a while because I feel like it's like this thing that's like a new possibility for people. If you're starting a restaurant, or if you have dreams to open a restaurant, like a pop-up is in much easier reach than say a food truck. You can literally leverage relationships to use voided space when like a restaurant's not open to get into that space. Has your knowledge and your skill set around executing pop-ups since we last spoke evolved? Are you better at it now? Like, and how so?
Yeah, I think most of my education is trial by fire.
Okay.
And so inevitably there's a growth because there's a failure, right? Like a forest fire is a terrible thing, but it also allows new growth to come in.
Right.
It's like that analogy. some of the things that I've learned in the last 4 years from the pop-up space is that the ability to grow from a pop-up has a finite ceiling, right? So there's only certain hours in a day. When you're having a pop-up, you're the chef, typically. You're the marketer. You're the accountant. You are the person getting everything from point A to point B. Everyone loves to jump on my Instagram and see the beautiful tablescapes, right?
Right.
But you know what they don't want to see? They don't want to see the next day when I'm returning all of the stuff to the rental company and I have a van and we're pulling all that stuff. They don't want to see us doing dishes. They don't want to see at the end of these events, we go back to our commissary kitchen. That sucks.
Yeah.
It's not fun. Like, they don't want to see that. They just want to see the beautiful shot.
Mm-hmm. So what are you doing anything differently today to have your pop-ups hit harder, I guess is what I'm curious about.
Yes, I am focusing more on the things that I am ultra passionate about and allowing my team to take more responsibility.
Okay.
Which I suck at.
Okay. So what are the things that you're ultra passionate? Obviously the Indian food. So you birthed a new pop-up with Aatma. When did that first pop-up happen?
So 2021, I believe, was the first time that we did Aatma.
Okay. What was the motivation behind starting Aatma?
My teacher, Kurush Dalal. So it's funny. Last time we talked, I had that lapse of like, I left the restaurant. I was trying to figure out my life. And then I listened to a podcast called the Real Food Podcast. That was this India-based podcast with this brilliant man named Vikram Doctor. And he had a guest on for this little clip, and it was Kurush. And I followed him on Instagram, and the next thing I know, he was doing an online class all about food and politics. And at the time, I didn't really know anything about food and politics.
I'm trying to make the connection right now, but I'm sure, food literally touches everything. So
right.
Yeah.
And so I thought that there was a really great opportunity. However, it's all in India time. And I was like, well, I don't have a job in the world. I might as well figure this out. We're all quarantined. So changed my schedule, and day one in the class radically changed the way I thought about food.
What was it about this mentor, this teacher, that originally pulled you in? You said it was a clip. Well, what was he saying in that clip?
So in that clip, he was talking very eloquently about how food evolves. We talk a lot about, things like appropriation versus appreciation, which I think is a really good point to hit on some point. But he was talking about food in the context of how it radically changes based off of geography. And I think in America, we don't realize that, we go into a supermarket in December and we can get tomatoes.
Yeah, or bananas any time of year.
Yeah. There's look at my garden out there, right?
Right.
It's dead. We can't get that stuff. So I think the wool's been pulled over our eyes where we don't understand that seasonality and regions change.
Right.
If we're in Florida, we can get those things right now.
Right. So he said you learned that food changes over landscape. So that pulled you in. And then you took the class, and you said that first class changed your life. What happened in that first class?
I started understanding that food is often used in the world as a weapon.
Okay.
And when you start researching things like the Bengali famine in 1943 and how the actions of Churchill really led to this deep famine that cost over 3 million people their lives.
Wow.
I didn't learn that in school. I don't know if you did.
No.
Right? Like in the West, we talk about the West.
I just learned that.
And when I started to understand that, the Amritsari massacre and all of these things, I started understanding that food is only political oftentimes.
Right. Well, you think about war, one of the biggest strategies in war is cutting off supply chain, sinking ships, destroying railroads, like cutting off supply. So people have if you can't eat, if you can't drink, then you can't support an army.
It's so crazy because I didn't put two and two together with that, right? Imagine you're trying to move 1 million troops. Think of all the food they have to eat during the course of a day. That's an insane.
Yeah, which is crazy because before we hit record in today's conversation, where we're talking about the level of abundance we have today and just how good we have it, and at the same time, seems like there's more distress and just were we ever really tracking happiness in history? Who knows? Probably not. But it seems like with all the good and all the abundance in the world today, we're still not happy what's going on. And just to think of the fact that we don't even realize how good we have it with our how accessible food is just an entitlement. how messed up is that we don't even see how lucky we are, you know?
Yeah.
So of course, why would you recognize food as war when it's just been, all you got to do is go to the store and you can think anything you could desire is there.
I think the politics of food changed the way that I cook. It changed the way that I view food, and it has now become such an important thing for me to talk about. Not only because it's become a passion point, but I think that we always have to I think it's important to view the world as legacy versus currency, right? Of course, it's important to make money and take care of our families, but also what's the legacy we're leaving behind? And I think the more we understand about food and politics, the more that we can help humanity push forward.
100%. Dude, I'm loving this, and you're really striking a chord with me. I had a past guest on the show. Of course, his name's escaping me, but he was a founder of Bar Taco, and I reached out to him being like, hey man, like you're a venture capitalist. You seem to be able to help people. I believe I have this asset. I'm trying to figure out how to make money while hanging on to my legacy. And he said, Eric, you have to decide. Is it cash or is it king? Is it revenue or is it legacy? What matters more to you? And I think that there's a balance. Like it doesn't have to be one or the other. I think it's possible to find a balance, but how do we do that? So you're learning all this. You're recognizing that food isn't just a thing that we put in our bellies when we're hungry, but it's like this tool that changes with location, geography, and also it can be used as a weapon. We're not really even touching on the fact that it's like Indian food, but it's like more of a holistic approach to food. So are you like, where exactly is the passion is what I'm trying to figure out? Because you said your evolution was focusing on what you're passionate about and you're delegating more of the business side to your team. So what is exactly your passion today?
Yeah, today it's exploring food from the Indian subcontinent and trying to educate the West of the incredible diversity that exists.
Okay.
I have this unique thing about me that I've come to discover. I understand at a very base level Indian cuisine, and I am very much the student. I want to make sure that is very, very much said. But as much as I know about this and as much as I study, and I've studied food from the subcontinent in one way, shape, or form for about 16 years. And I spend a lot of time talking with Kurush and a lot of my friends there studying this stuff. But as much as I know, one of the things that's so hard for people who come from India is to understand the West, right? These are two different cultures that work very differently. You know, and being in India, you see that very much firsthand, where it's a completely different world, beautiful in its nature, but just different. So I am kind of the bridge to a lot of this sometimes, where I can translate the deep concepts and philosophical things behind food to a Western audience that just understands naan and
okay, I think I'm picking up. So your passion isn't necessarily the ingredients associated with the food and how the food's produced, but it's more so the culture and the values around food that is inherent to Indian culture.
Yeah, the easiest way I can describe it is this. When you grow up with not a lot of family, just my mom and I for the most part, I think a lot of times inherently you kind of fear abandonment, right? And that's been a reoccurring theme that I've worked on in therapy. The reason I say that is this.
Say that again. I want to make sure I heard it right.
When you grow up with just a mom and not a lot of family, it's easy to fear abandonment. It's certainly an emotional trigger for me. And I learned that through therapy, right? One of the things I found in Indian food is this incredible phrase, and in Hindi it's Aditi Devo Bhava, and it means the guest is of God. It's something that culturally, when you're young, when somebody comes over as a guest, they view them as an incarnation of God. It's a level of hospitality that we cannot wrap our minds around in the West. And so in India, I found a different context of grief. In the people in India, like Kurush and Rhea and Ishan and Ragini and all of my friends there, I found this makeshift family that accepted me for who I was, even despite our incredible cultural differences.
Well, when I think of God, the words that come to my mind, at least the Roman Catholic version of God, and I think God's, no matter who your God is, there's a lot of similarities. You can use it like as a blanketed term, but you think of warmth, generosity, caring, giving, like being kind to your neighbor. And when you are a guest, or when you have a guest, it's an opportunity to live in the way God would if he was in that moment. You can be warm, you can be generous, you can take them in from the shelter. It's that opportunity to live those finest versions of what it means to be holy, if that's what you are. Is that the correlation?
Yeah, I think that there's a correlation between the deep amount of reverence and respect we would have if a quote unquote God walked into your house, right? Also, this comes back to food.
Yeah, I was starting to connect the parallels there. So when I was listening to you talk, it kind of reminds me of what's happening here in the West. So I think the parallel there, like slow food, organic food, sustainable food is to Indian culture as franchise corporation is to Western culture. So it's happening here where there are elements of the past that we're trying to, I guess, nurture and protect and hang on to. And when we last spoke, you said something that kind of stood out to me. I asked you, because you focus, part of your story is focusing on the farms. Before you went deep into the world of Indian food, you were focusing on the farms here in New England and the relationship from seed to table, and how we can support these farms as restaurant owners. And I asked you, why aren't more people doing this? If this is so clearly the right thing to do, why aren't we doing it? And you said, because it's just stop being lazy. We have to stop being lazy. And that struck a chord with me, not necessarily in a good way, because I've been speaking to a lot of people who are choosing not to be lazy, who are choosing to do food sustainably, who are choosing to pay respect and homage to the old way, the right way, the don't fuck food up way, keep it honest. And on top of that, they're also trying to be good to not just the food, respect the food, but respect their staff and offer good pay and security and work-life balance and retreats, traveling, educating. And the truth is, you can be the hardest working motherfucker out there and try to do these things, and you're still going out of business. So what's wrong with the world where if we literally cannot choose to do the right thing and survive? So relative to what you're saying, we're looking at Eastern culture, and they've been able to maintain their values around food, maybe or maybe not.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, why can't we? Is that what you're trying to deliver? Is that the core of the message in your book and your writing, or am I stretching it here?
A little. Let's take a look at a couple of the things that you just said. I view the world as BC, before COVID, and AC, after COVID.
Okay, so before Christ, after Christ.
Well, before COVID is kind of the initials that I would use for it, right? And in 2020, we were in that COVID world.
Right.
The price of food was very different then. And before COVID, people just were inherently a little bit lazier, where they wouldn't leave their restaurant to go hang out at a farm. It's not that people are lazy. It's that to support a farm and to start to build a network where the farmer and the restaurateur can come together, that takes work. And I also fully understand from being a restaurateur that to leave your restaurant and try to establish that is hard, right? Like I have empathy there, but it takes time to build that relationship.
Right.
And I think people didn't want to invest that time into it before COVID. After COVID, the world is very different.
We had more time.
Yeah. Like the world now, the food prices that exist here in this country are astronomical in comparison.
Why do you think that is?
Oy.
Or why do you know that is?
A lot of it has to do with the just flat out inflation.
Right.
Right. Like, without getting political about it, because I'm really not. I think the politics of this is, when you print a bunch of money and you give people a ton of money, it inflates the currency. And now we're having all this residual of there's all this demand where people are going out and they're doing this and they're doing that. There was a surplus in the economy of the dollar, and now we're feeling the vacuum of what that is.
Right.
That's just inflation 101.
Right. I mean, in terms of, like, it's weird. Like, I think we're saying, like, relative to what food was 30 years ago, 40 years ago, until like the most recent times. Like we really got good at centralizing the food system and making food cheap.
Yeah.
So is food getting more expensive, or is it getting back to what the cost of food is? I wonder. Relative to our lives, we've only known cheap, processed, centralized agricultural farming. So we got really good at making cheap food. In 1930, I think, and this is a quote, if you want to check my work, I think it was the town food saved. Yeah, the town food saved. It's a references, I think, Waterbury in the Vermont or something like that, where there's this community that's centered around food. They make a point that I think, and don't quote me exactly, I think it was like 22% of the average household income went to food. Today it's like 9% or like 11%. So is it that food is getting more expensive, or is it that we are starting to, our taste for food is starting to get elevated because of, what we're seeing online, and like we want to go out to eat. And just like, if you want good, organic, wholesome food, it actually costs money.
Yeah. It's Occam's razor here, right? Where we look at it and say, the reality of it is everything is costing more. It's costing more from the seed to the table, flat out. That's just fact.
But should it cost more?
I think that's a question, or that's an answer that I don't know if I can answer. And here's why. If the cost of living goes up for the farmer, that needs to get passed on. For if all of us who are restaurateurs or work in this industry, if all of a sudden chicken goes up $1.10 a pound, that needs to get passed on.
Right.
Right. And who ends up paying for that? The consumer. Well, the consumer then goes, well, I can go do this at home, which we're starting to see now.
Right.
We're starting to see a pullback from an economic standpoint of when people are going out. The prices have changed because the landscape has changed. Now, if you look at a country like India, we can't compare that with the United States. 1.3 billion people versus 320 million-ish.
Right.
We look at India, that it takes about 20,000 trucks a day of onion to feed that country.
Wow.
That is insane. Now you look at it from a landmass perspective, it's about a third of the United States, little less.
And they all live on the ocean, majority.
No.
That's kind of like wherever there's the ocean in a country that borders the ocean, the majority of the population is always on the coast.
There's a lot of people on the coast. There's a lot of people inland too.
Well, if you look at America, like where are the majority?
Sure.
California,
Yeah,
New York, Florida, Texas. Like people gravitate towards the ocean. I think that's like as part of the reason why they think our brains got so big, because we're eating so much protein in the fish, right?
Yep.
So like I think there is like this draw to the ocean and water as a food source, that you always also export all the opportunities around the coast. So I'm assuming that with the Indian coastline, if you're going to like find out where's the majority of the population, I would imagine it's near water.
Yeah. I mean, Mumbai's 22 million.
Right.
Kolkata is, I think, 16. Like there's millions of people, and India has so many people, right? But if you think of it from an agricultural standpoint, apart from all that, you're trying to feed 4 times the population of the United States in a place that has about a third of its landmass.
But are they doing it sustainably?
To be honest, kind of.
Really? How?
I don't have all the answers on how, but I can tell you what it was like to be there. And every morning, I don't stay in hotels. I stayed in an apartment in Khar in Mumbai, which is kind of like the northwestish part a bit. I'd get out and there's just carts filled with produce. People are one person's just doing coconuts. The other has a bunch of different vegetables. Everything very fresh. Farming is a very politically hot button issue in India right now for a lot of reasons. But from a standpoint of everyone, here's one of the biggest differences from the West. Every single place in India has a garden. Even if you're in this skyscraper, you're at least growing curry leaf, or you're growing something that is usable, peppers, mango trees everywhere. Like, I think that they look at space as an opportunity of life, and we look at space as an opportunity to flex. So,
meaning use space to support life, whereas we use space to show status.
Yeah, perfectly. So.
Got it. It's funny you say that, because I've heard this statement that we're going to get to the point where we can no longer support, we can no longer feed. Our population is going to reach a critical mass where it won't be possible to feed that many people. And I'm like, how is that true? When you think about, like, we could literally use every square inch of this space around us. Like, we look outside, how much space can support food?
Yeah.
So much of it. So is it under the current lens and the current economic system where everyone has so many different, like, and it's weird because I just don't understand how that's possible if we all just started prioritizing food and more people put their energy and time and resources to producing food. There is no way. If you've ever had a garden in your backyard, a 5x10 garden, how much food do you throw away?
Yeah.
Like, you telling me there's not enough land on this planet to produce enough food to feed people? That doesn't equate in my mind. So I think it's more of like an economic thing where we can't do it under the given current economic model. I'm not an expert on this.
So my teacher Kurosh has this phrase. He says, in this world, we have enough for everyone's need, but we don't have enough for everyone's greed. And I think that really hits the nail on the head. You're 100% right. There's ways you look at so many cultures who are just utilizing space. Aquaponics, hydroponics.
Did I use the wrong word? Is it aquaponics or hydroponics?
So they're a little bit different methods, but aquaponics and hydroponics both fit into this paradigm.
Okay.
When you look at permacultures, because at the end of the day, you need soil to grow things, and the soil has to be healthy.
Right.
This is what we learn from farmers.
What is our farming technique doing?
Yeah.
Stripping the earth of its nutrition. Yeah.
So we need to be stewards of this planet and not parasites of the planet.
Right. Like the Amazonians, like what they're doing, how they figured out a way to coexist with nature and nurture what wants to happen naturally, and to be stewards of that. If more people thought like that, but like, I mean, we're kind of getting super heady right now, and like this is a restaurant business podcast. I just love this shit, but I guess what I'm trying to get at. We got here by you saying I'm now focusing on my passion, and why I want to make an example, why I want to come back to you is because, again, success is relative. You are figuring out a way to carve out a living while focusing on your passion, which is why I want to continue to make an example of you. How do we do that? How to find that balance. And really how we got down this path is I was really trying to distill what is the passion. And I feel like the passion for you is the transformative nature of what you've learned and how you can shift culture. Is that what is driving you?
Yeah, it's this deep passion to showcase what I consider as the greatest cuisine in the entire planet, and it's often marginalized. But
the passion isn't necessarily about the food and the ingredients, but the impact of the culture, the values surrounding the food.
Yeah, I think it starts with...
That's where it started for you, is the ingredients, and then you learn there's so much more.
Yeah, it started with a bite of food.
Right.
When Indra many years ago said, "Do you want to try something?" I had that split second moment of saying yes or no.
Right.
And a lot of my life, I said no. I chose to say yes in that moment, and it altered the face of the trajectory of where I am.
So we see that in West Coast culture, of this movement from farm to table, where chefs started to realize it's not about how many ingredients and how can I manipulate these ingredients. It's about sourcing the finest ingredient and honoring the practices that go into growing the ingredient. And when you can do that, the food is so much better. And beyond it, better, healthier for you. So, I mean, we could go in so many different directions right now. But I do want to make sure, I want to like kind of shelf this idea of like, how do we get there back to your evolution as an entrepreneur? Because you are an entrepreneur. I also want to make sure we talk about when we left off last, you had severed your relationship with Chris Viaud, who is another past guest in the show. You opened a restaurant together. You backed out of the restaurant. That restaurant was Greenleaf, or was this a different? Okay.
Yeah.
100-seat restaurant. You backed out of that relationship because of what was happening in your life. And you have since mended that relationship, and now you're again business partners in your catering business. So take us through the reconnection of that business partnership.
Yeah, I love this because I love telling stories like this, because fundamentally to our core, yes, we're chefs, we're all of these things, we're business owners, but we're people first, and we're in the people business. And when you open a restaurant like Greenleaf that my heart and soul went into, but you get to a point where, people come calling because you're winning best restaurant in the state year one. You're crushing out food. Chris did an incredible job on the menu. There's moments that we still joke with that are just insane that we've experienced together. When COVID hits and we split, I always say, like, there was a part of me that thought that was the pinnacle of my career, and everything else is just going to be the epilogue. And I realized that that wasn't even close to it, because I never hated Chris. We had conflict, and in any relationship, conflict is inevitable, right? I think the beauty, and I'm curious as his side of this too, which I think is probably
I want to get him. He's one of my reconnections I want to make happen.
So one of the things that I learned through this is that any relationship that you believe is worth fighting for, you double down. And I really, and Chris isn't just a business partner. He's one of my closest friends. Which adds a whole other element, right? Because conflict happens with business partners, but conflict is inevitable. Disunity to me is unacceptable. And so
disunity is unacceptable.
Yeah. I kind of viewed it as like, in a relationship, you're going to have pain. You're going to have conflict. You're going to have disagreements, but his willingness to accept his role in that and my willingness to accept my role in that allowed healing to begin.
So owning whatever you brought to the table to make things not work, to identify, address it, and resolve.
Yeah, there was a stark moment. Through it all, I was sad, but I never hated Chris. I just knew that we were both under so much stress to perform that our entire lives were wrapped around into this project.
Right. And the pandemic on top of all that.
Exactly. Yeah. And there's no playbook for this stuff. Right. So we had a bunch of stresses, plus just a lot of business decisions that we made at that time, bringing in certain people that didn't work out. And so when Chris and I broke, I knew I didn't hate Chris. Mm-hmm. There's nothing.
Hated the situation.
Hated the situation, right?
Yeah.
And understanding that the person I can love, the action I cannot, helps me separate that this isn't personal. So there's this funny moment where we were both doing a dinner for Aron Sanchez's charity, and we were up in the Lakes region in New Hampshire, and I had a course and he had a course, and I was going on various podcasts and I would talk about this because I think talking about conflict from a business perspective when you have partners is a really great thing because it helps people navigate it, right? So,
it's one of the reasons why I always bring up partnerships on the podcast. I'm not trying to be a dick by asking you to talk to me about your business partnership failures. I want to know what happened, what you learned from that, so you can give other people foresight of what not to do or to be aware of. We don't talk about this stuff. It's things you're not supposed to talk about on a public forum. But I think that we can learn so much through the stories and experiences of other people.
Yeah, and it challenges us to be our best self.
Yeah,
right?
Why do restaurants fail? Usually it has something to do with money.
Yep.
Or it has something to do with a partnership.
Yep.
Undercapitalized, not knowing how to make money, or having a partnership crumble.
You're going to have way more, I had a bad business partner than anything else.
Right.
And I never did. Chris is a great business partner. Chris had some room to grow. I had a ton of room to grow. Now I'm a much better version of Keith. I'm a much better communicator. I'm a much better leader. I'm a much better friend, and I'm a much better business partner because we went through it.
How do you communicate better now?
I start by I think it's communication needs to consist of taking the emotion out of it. And I think a lot of times him and I got so wrapped up in the emotion of it that we were never mean to each other, honestly, at all. But there was times where I needed to vocalize something or I needed to step up and I didn't see that. And I think he was still young in his career, figuring out what it meant to be that leader, to pull the reins back and allow his staff to do some things. I think the growth that I've seen in Chris is absolutely remarkable. And I'm so freaking excited and I love him so much for it, because that growth takes challenge. It takes work, it takes introspection.
Right. What do they say? I think the numbers associated with batting average and restaurant success is weirdly similar. If you're batting 500 in MLB, you are a Hall of Famer, right? If you are able to keep half of the restaurants you open, you are a Hall of Famer. And we don't hear about the restaurants that close. Even if you're doing 300, you're still doing okay. You can still keep your job as a baseball player. You know what I'm saying? So I think it's just the reality of it. So back to the restaurant industry, I think Chris recently closed a restaurant too, didn't he? So you can be the most talented person. I don't know where I'm going with this train of thought, but failures are going to happen. But every time you strike out, you get a little bit better at swinging a bat.
Yeah. And we don't want to see the strikeouts.
Right.
Like, there's a lot of pride in this industry, clearly, right? Like, we're chefs. Come on.
Yeah.
We burn ourselves, we sear it on a plancha, and we keep going, right? But at the same point, the more that we talk about vulnerability, and this shit's hard. Like, it's not easy to sit here, look at you in the eye, and be like, yeah, man, I've been in therapy for 8 years. Like, I don't have all the answers.
I should probably get into therapy. I've been thinking about it. I just travel too much, and I don't know, maybe.
Hold on. Oh, now we're flipping the table. The reason, so I travel too much is an absolute excuse.
Yeah.
And I'm going to call you out on it because I love you, buddy.
It's expensive too, man, isn't it?
It is, but would you ever say, oh, you know what? Like, I'm not going to go to the gym. It's not worth it. Or I'm not going to take care of my body. I'm just going to mainline cake for the next 6 years and hope dude, the most important investment you can put into you is you.
Right.
And I understand there's a level of hypocrisy when I say this because, like, I'm an overweight dude who's working really hard on trying to, like, understand food addiction and do all of those things, right? Like, that's not easy to talk about, but at the same point, if there's no me, there's no farmer's dinner.
Right.
There's no more cookbooks. There's none of that stuff. There's people in this world who rely on me now, like my girlfriend and my friends and the people who love me. And now I need to turn that love onto me. So no excuses, brother. Like, I'm going to follow up on you.
Okay. Well, if you know a guy or a girl, let me know. Maybe I'll consider it.
What up, unstoppable restaurant owners and operators? We have to interrupt today's video to let you know that Restaurant Unstoppable and Restaurant Systems Pro, we're taking our relationship to the next level. Beginning in July of 2024, Fred Langley, CEO of Restaurant Systems Pro, is making himself available once a week in Restaurant Unstoppable Network to answer all of your restaurant systems questions, whether it's the profit margins. He will look at your P&L. Bring your P&L. He will take a look at that. He will dissect it. He will help you find your profit, whether that be through budgeting, inventory management, costing and recipe cards, labor, checklists, you name it. He is a master of restaurant systems, and he's making himself available to you. Fred Langley and Restaurant Systems Pro started as a consulting firm, and for over 16 years, they've been helping their clients increase their profit by 10% or more. What are you waiting for? Click the link below to join our Facebook group, Restaurant Unstoppable Network.
You're a better communicator. That has helped your business. You said you're a better friend. What were the other things you said you were doing better in terms of your relationship, your partnership? We can take the heat off of me and put it back on.
It's funny when the table's turned. No, I want to go back to that story because I think there's some relevance. So we're at the Ron Sanchez event, and I just finished my course, and Chris is standing at the back entrance to the restaurant, and he's just kind of looking out at this, like, parking area. And I go up to him, and I'm like, hey, buddy. And he goes, Chris has this beautiful kind of stoic thing about him sometimes, and he just sits there and goes, so what do you think about getting the band back together? I'm like, and I kind of chuckle, and I'm like, for what? He's like, I know you got a lot of catering. I got a lot of catering. Like, we should do this thing. And I said, yeah, there's a lot to talk about, but, like, I appreciate that. And that was the opening to us discussing the things that I could have done better. And believe me, man, there's a lot. Like, that pain period was hard for me and hard for him and hard for his family.
Did he give you constructive criticism?
Yes. I the funny thing about it is I spend a lot of time in deep self-awareness. I have a lot of self-awareness. That's a blessing, but man, is it a curse. Because self-awareness can go into self-sabotage very quickly. And by the time Chris and I sat down in a coffee shop to talk about Greenleaf and talk about what a catering company would even look like, I already knew so much of the shit that I did wrong. And I was like, nothing I did, I felt like I ever did intentionally. And he knew that. And I knew that of him, which is why we were able to sit there.
What did you do wrong?
What did Chris do wrong?
What did you do wrong?
Oh, what did I do wrong? I think first and foremost, I tried to build a restaurant to bring in, to allow Chris to kind of go through and do kind of his vision of food, which was immaculate. Like, to be honest, it was better than I could have done at that time. I think I chose to have less impact in the kitchen than I should have. Because at the end of the day, I'm a chef. And doing all the paperwork and the marketing, and there was a modicum level of fun there, where it scratched the itch, but at the same point, I never wanted that to be my life. I wanted it to be my life for a bit. I made mistakes in certain personnel that I hired. I made mistakes in not speaking up and putting my foot down and having more constructive criticism from a menu standpoint and not pushing myself to have the courage to speak up there. And I think that I don't regret 1 second of being in that restaurant or one decision I made, because I wouldn't be here if I didn't.
So you recognized that he might have been a little ahead talent-wise at that moment, and you kind of let him take the reins on the creative? Or
no, Chris has always been more ahead talent-wise. Okay. Like, Chris is a very talented chef. I hate the comparison of who's better than who. Yeah. Like, because it's just.
But it sounds like there is something to be said about having lanes, staying in it, recognizing where you're strong or where like you should be. And it sounded like your strengths were with the marketing, promotion, paperwork side of things, which if he could manage the creative, chefing side of things, and you're going to focus on the other side of business. So it's good, I think, to find that balance and to swallow your pride and to respect those lanes. But was he maybe resenting you for not being as involved as you could have in the chef side? Okay.
Yeah. No, not from the chef side. I think that like I started to pull back from a lot of personal issues that I was going through. I started to pull back because I could never find, like, it never fully felt like mine at times. And that wasn't on Chris. That was on me.
Ego?
From my side of things, no, more like trying to find where I fit. I think that's what it was. Like, when you're a chef and you're not in a kitchen that you build, it gets really confusing. And if I had to do it all over again, I actually don't think I would change much. That is Chris's kitchen. It's his empire that he built there. And honestly, he deserves all of the accolades for that. Yes, I deserve we helped make it happen. But just like if Chris was sitting here, I say to Chris all the time, this is not your Mount Everest. Like, you have so much more he's going to do in his career. I've got 10 years on him. I ran some kitchens. I did all this stuff. By the time he got into the kitchen at Greenleaf, he was the most equipped to make Greenleaf what it is and why it's still there.
Okay. So, if he was sitting here, what would he say he could have done better? I'm sure you had these conversations. I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot, like speaking for him, but I kind of want to talk to him anyway. So maybe we should just wait for that to happen. I'll let him speak for himself.
I think that's a him question. I will say that one of the things that's beautiful with it is, as being a person who's pretty close in his life, and our time is precious, so we don't get to hang out as much as we'd love to, I'm sure. But being there since kind of day one and watching him in his career, having him come into the farmer's dinner and then subsequently all that he does now, the growth in him as a human being, his self-awareness, his self-confidence, him having to check pride, him having to like navigate this landscape, it's beautiful to watch because this is a person who has a great heart.
I love that. So when the band got back together, is the business, your catering business, you were doing catering before, right?
Yeah, we were both kind of separately, just, we'd have clients call and be like,
but you were working together and you had a business and there was catering on the table at that time?
No, when we did Greenleaf, there wasn't a lot of catering coming out of that because
you were brand new.
I started, before even year one, I started the Culture Bread and Sandwich Project, and where that was going to be kind of my baby for a bit, which was nice because it was scratching that itch.
Yeah.
And then as we left, he kind of took over those entities where, in all disclosure, I was like, please, no, take these.
Is that where his Caribbean concept ended up going, in the Culture Building?
No. So the Culture Building's our commissary kitchen now.
Is he Haitian? Is that?
Yeah, he's Haitian. And so when we were doing farmer's dinner back in the day, I would ask him about his roots. And I think I did a pop-up series called Roots. And the first taste of Haiti came out of that. And as he went to Top Chef, and he could tell this better, he started connecting even more with that. And I think that was an incredible experience for him. And as just his friend, to watch him develop these deep emotional ties with his culture and cuisine, and then really make that his own, has been really, really cool to watch, because the food that's coming out of it is great.
I love that. So when you came back together, when the band got back together, this was the first time, but you only got back together relative to the catering. You're not a part of the Greenleaf restaurant, or are you?
No, not at all.
So you guys have a separate business entity, where you combine forces to focus on the catering.
Correct.
How does that look today?
It looks a lot healthier, that's for sure. We're kind of 2 years in. He gets a lot of really great leads. We get some leads. And then we built a team, specifically a lot of the team that came out of Farmer's Dinner that's still there. Chef Andrew Robinson, John is just a rock star, Jackson, all these great guys.
Got it. In terms of, are you open to talk about money and how you're doing that? So what is that? Like you said, about 100,000?
Yeah, we broke six figures, which is really great. Our gross
just
revenue,
from catering.
Yeah. Our gross revenues, I'd have to look at the books, but we're doing pretty damn good.
And this is just one channel of revenue for him.
One channel of revenue.
And of that 100,000, what would you say your profit is on catering?
Tough one. We're doing pretty good. I would say we're somewhere in the 30 to 40%.
Okay, which is pretty on par for catering, I would say, in that ballpark. Almost double what you can do at a la carte dine-in. And so I'm trying to figure out. So one of the reasons, again, why I want to talk to you is because I think we live in this really cool time right now where like there are so many different paths you can take. When I started this podcast, I was like, I want to shine a spotlight on the path to take to be successful in the restaurant industry. And I realized that there's just so many different paths you can blaze in this industry. And I think as we move into the future, the world continues to fragment and to diversify, and there's just more and more paths you can take. And then when I talk to people like you who are using their media, their passion for writing, and they're taking this holistic approach of, I'm going to use pop-ups in conjunction with my my books to create this brand around me and my passion for my cuisine. But beyond that, the mission behind my cuisine, I think when I say the restaurant industry has the power to change the world, it's because of people like you who are diving deeper in and realize that it's all connected. There's a much bigger picture. There's something more important happening behind this. And the reason why I think the restaurant industry can change the world is because we are the closest industry to food, and food, for as long as our existence, has been what we evolve around. Our ability to source it, grow it, feed each other. It is who we are. Food. We are life. We take life. We put it inside of us. It's all connected. So if there's going to be an industry that changes things, it's going to be the restaurant industry. So I want to share stories like yours because I feel like you're an example of how we can use food to change the world. How are you making it happen? Do you feel like you're putting a dent in? Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
I mean, you're just one person, but what if everybody thinks like this? This is how revolutions start. One ember stokes a little fire, stokes a bigger fire, and then you have a forest fire.
I think that there's inherent challenges with all of this, right? It would be much easier to take a corporate job where you're getting healthcare, you're, the chef of a hotel chain. You don't get the creative passion that you always do in this. The reality is my life is inherently tied to my work, and that is not a path for everyone.
I was literally just talking about this morning when I was being interviewed. He was like, how do you find work-life balance? And I say, I think that if you find your definite purpose in life, it's not a matter of work-life balance, but it's your life's work. Like it's like when you find that thing that gives you purpose, for some people, that's their family, and they exist to work to support the people, the thing that they love. And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't have any kids. I recently have a girlfriend. I can see how relationships complicate things because you want to make people happy. But for the longest time, it was just me, one person, going after it. And that was my purpose. So I guess, I don't know how I ended up down this road.
I want to turn the tables.
Okay.
Can I do that?
Oh, God. I might cry. I did it earlier today, too, when I got interviewed.
That's okay. Safe space. We got this. Here's the thing. I think what you just said was really profound and great. When this is our life's purpose, we find direction. We find all of these beautiful things.
We have a visitor walking in. This happens all the time in restaurants. We're at your home right now.
Hey, buddy. We're just doing a podcast.
It's all right. Was that the same person that walked in the last time we did a podcast?
No. This is John. He's one of our employees.
Oh, what's up, John? Nice to meet you. Eric Cacciatore.
So here's the interesting thing. When you said like it's our life's purpose, right? It's this thing where it gives us strength. It gives us passion. It allows us to move forward. But you also just touched on two things that I'm still learning. and I don't have all the answers to, but I want to bring out there. Number one was I just recently had a girlfriend, or have a girlfriend. There's a beauty in a support system because just like you said, there's days where your bank account looks like shit.
Right.
And you know what unconditional love says? Unconditional love says, regardless of how much money is in that account, I still love you.
Right.
A lot of times we cannot, God, man, I hope that you have 100 more years of this. And I hope that every one of those years is exponentially better for you.
Yeah.
But in the process, unless you're a better version, you're never going to level up.
Right. No, I hear that. And I think I hear how other people make you a better version. Is that the takeaway?
I think other people help bring out the best in you. And if you internalize it, some people can bring out the worst in you, right? We all know that. But what true is so sappy. True love isn't, I see this person and I want, and I know how good they can be. True love is, I see this person.
And they are who they are, exactly the way they are in this moment. Like you accept them for what they are, who they are.
Yeah. All of their flaws, all of their strengths. Like when I look at somebody I love, like my girlfriend, I don't slippery slope, right? I don't see the person that she can be. I see the person that she is. Mm-hmm. And it's funny, like even non-romantic love, like you, buddy, I've known you for years now. And when I see you, I don't see this person who has this successful podcast. This is a part of what you do. I see this person who has this incredible heart of change where they want to leave this place better than they found it. And that is rare. That, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, as a chef, all we get to do is leave legacy. And hopefully someday somebody's going to be flipping through YouTube or flipping through a podcast and hear this moment, and it helps change their life where they go, this is the moment where I leave legacy rather than just currency.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate those words, man. So we're at the point where about an hour and 12 minutes into this recording, I'm trying to pull business advice to help people, to inspire more people to be change makers in the industry. Because I think that if there is one industry to do it, it's the restaurant industry because of the transformative power here. So how do we make it work? How do we put the focus on purpose? Because what you said earlier is that you're trying to shift your focus on purpose, on mission, on culture. And if you look at the most successful entrepreneurs out there, they are the promoter of their purpose, the promoter of their mission, and they surround themselves with the people who are better at the thing than they are, right? So what are you learning about how to free up more of your time to do the thing that really makes you happy, makes you glow on the inside?
Yeah, I really want to come back to the self-discovery side of it because there's a lot of information we can find online, right? Like, heck, there's just tons of it. And there becomes a moment where you get almost this self-help bulimia where all of a sudden people are talking to you, and you're consuming all this knowledge and then you just spit it out, but you don't internalize it. I think where I'm at in my career right now is to be the next version of Keith, to get to that next level of whatever that's going to look like. Number one, I have to learn to let go. I have to learn to let go of my own insecurities. I have to learn to trust my employees. I have to learn to trust myself. That's hard. Ultimately, I'm not saying I don't trust John who's sitting in that living room. Of course I trust John. Sometimes I just don't trust me.
Me to do what?
To continue to work hard so that they can be employed. To continue to put my head down, and even though my life is falling apart at some points, step the fuck up and be the hero that needs to be in that moment.
The pressure. I mean, it's one thing to be a visionary, to have these dreams. I think this is striking a chord with me in the sense that my biggest fear in life is becoming a con artist or being a con artist. And I think that when you think of the word con artist, you're somebody who builds confidence. People build, you get people to have confidence in you. You make a promise. We're going to do this thing. We're going to do this thing. We're going to do this thing. And then you take you raise the money, you take all the money and you say, later, I'm out of here. Thanks. I think people can be labeled as a con artist because they have all the right intention to do the thing. They get the money. Hell yeah, let's go. Shit, what did I do? I don't know what I'm doing. I got all this, people have confidence in me and I don't know how to make it happen and I don't want to let people down. Like, like my mission statement is to change the world, right? Like who the fuck am I to have that audacity to think that they can do that? So like, is that kind of what you're feeling, where you're like, you want to lead people into this future where you have this vision, and like, once you accept that responsibility, like, are you going to actually be able to support the people who are coming with you?
Yeah, I think I can't change the world. The only tool that I have is inspiration. I think that's our greatest calling. Like, I don't know if I'm that ambitious to change the world. I love that, and I love that because that's something that's important to you. But right now, I'm just trying to change my world.
Right. But I think one thing that's important is that I'm convinced that I have changed the world.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And that's not to say like the world is literally functioning differently, but I know that I have changed. I've empowered one person. I've inspired one person. And I know that they are turning around and taking these lessons, taking these ideas, and they're leveraging those things in their business, and they are changing their world, which is changing the worlds of those who are closest to them. I don't know how it's manifesting, but I mean, if you can change your world and you can empower somebody around you, you are changing the world in a way. It's the butterfly effect. But if we can amplify that and we can help people understand that they can change their world, and if you change your world, you change the world of those around you, then that's when I think there's this transformative power that happens. It ripples out.
Yeah. Well, you're giving a voice to people who don't necessarily always have a voice, right? Like right now recording this, you're amplifying a message that I feel is important in my worldview. But if we all think that we're all sitting in our own movie theater, watching our life and our movie play out, if I left that movie theater and went into your movie, I'd be like, oh, there's Eric. Oh, yeah. Like, wow, he acts so different. Like, this is so crazy because it's your worldview. In my worldview, I'm trying to change me. I'm realizing that I'm not the enemy, but I'm that clump of clay that I can now mold and say, if this statue starts to inspire people, then that's all I got. And I'm okay with that. I don't want to be famous. And when I look at money, I certainly don't go, well, that's what I need. I need the biggest house and the best car. I just want people to go, man, that's a guy who really loved.
So as you look to the future, if you envision this world, if you are able to leave a legacy and you're able to take what you've learned through your study of Indian and Eastern culture and what they're doing and how we can find a balance between Eastern culture and Western culture and make a shift, like, what is a world that you would like to see?
I think that Indian food right now, from a social media perspective, is often demonized as dirty and unclean. And there's street food videos of people doing very unhygienic things. This is not a world that's acceptable. This is the food of kings. This is the food of royalty. When you look at the Mughal Empire that completely transformed that subcontinent, when you looked at black pepper as literally being gold, the reason it's called black gold is it was traded above the price of gold. When the Visigoths sack Rome, Romans go, how do we get our city back? You know what they say? Money, but also 400 sacks of black pepper. That literally saved Rome. Wow. When we start revering the people and saying, hey, these aren't bad people, they're not unclean, we start breaking down the walls of stereotypes and racism and all of these things, and we start sitting at a dinner table together. Mm-hmm. To me, that's the legacy I want people to leave. I want somebody from the West to go, man, this food is more than a buffet line.
What are some of the values, the cultures, the things that you idolize or just revere in Eastern culture that you'd like to see more of in Western culture?
There is a ton. First and foremost, it's community. It's all about community. I've lived in this neighborhood for 3 years, and I know a little bit about my neighbors. But I can tell you I lived in Mumbai for 2 weeks, and I met more people. The sense of community is so important. The next thing that I think is so important here is the reverence for food. A lot of times we view cooking in the West as an act that's a chore. In the subcontinent, this is an act of love. A lot of times, an Indian mother or grandmother can't say the words, I'm sorry, but you know they're sorry when they give you food. Mm-hmm. That's beautiful.
2 things: more focused around community, more focused around the reverence of food. So what is happening in Western culture where there's a lack of community? Why do you think there's a lack of community?
I think that there's a lack of community because all there is division. Like division from a political perspective, division from an ideological perspective. When we realize that we all do the same things every day, we all need to drink water, we all need to eat, we all need to feel safe, secured, and loved. We have split the fabric of society where we're starting to view all of these things as, well, that person does it that way, so therefore they're wrong. We stopped breaking bread, and now we're just breaking hearts with the things that we say.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's pretty common knowledge at this point, which is why I'm hopeful for the future that we know that a lot of what's breaking down the fabrics of society is this increased digital presence, right? Spending more time looking at our phones and looking people in the eyes, which is why I travel across the country to have these conversations. I think we need to sit across the table from each other and have long form, deep, meaningful conversations where we just try to understand people and their perspective. How do we get away? Like, what is the answer? Is it abandoning social media? Is that reasonable? Is that even we live in this world right now where is it even possible to get away from these tools that we need to supposedly market ourselves? These tools we need to do things more efficiently, to compete. Do we need these things in our life? And is it even an option to abandon them?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not an option. Once Pandora's box is open, there's no going back. That's the reality. And my thing is, I don't think we try to take away the liberties of people. I think we try to help them redirect what becomes important. You understand what I mean there? Because that's a really important thing. If I said all these phones now have to be taken away and social media is the devil and all of these things, that doesn't solve the problem. That feels like we're restricting people's freedoms and rights to do these things. The better thing is to share stories and inspire people to now use that media, use their 4-second attention span, which is more like 0.4 seconds. It's to use that attention span to now focus on things that do matter.
Right. No, I hear that. I mean, there are people in my space that really encourage more people to get on platforms and to more people to create content. It's like this weird thing where, like, a lot of my message, I use media. I don't know how I could run a restaurant and do all these things, have a podcast. This is a full-time job. 2 on-site interviews published a week. Like, it's a full-time job. It's a weird balance of, like, you know, I think there's this mix of communication of, hey, you need to get on social media more to share your story, to use social media to influence people. But in the same time, people are saying you need to get off social media more. You need to sit across the table. You need to spend more time building relationships with people in your community, not across the country or across the world. How do we have our cake and eat it too? Like, how do we do both?
Yeah. $1 million question, right?
Right.
I just view this as from a society perspective. Let's just say it this way. We're not going to get people to stop texting in a car, but we know that when you text in a car, you can die.
Right.
My job isn't to go, hey, put your phone down. Nobody's going to listen to me. Nobody's going to listen, even though there's all this stuff about not texting and driving. All we can do is try to inspire people and say, if your focus is going to be here, and we step away from the texting and driving, if your focus is going to be on your phone, I hope that the next swipe is something that profoundly impacts you.
Right. So, I mean, this kind of leads me to one of the other, like, inner conflicts I've been having recently, and I want to bounce this off you, is that, so as somebody who makes a living creating content, I hate that I am an influencer. I didn't create this title, but it's what I've been titled as an influencer. I am realizing that in order for me to make money as an influencer, I need to go out and find people who are willing to pay me to support this podcast, i.e. sponsors, right? And 2022 into 2023 was my best year ever. I made $203,000 and I do about 40% profit. So $80,000 for a single male who lives in a camper, doable. Yeah. When all my costs of living are business expenses, right? I started to learn that in order to go get that money, I had to start to focus more on supporting and promoting my sponsors. And in order for certain, like, I was getting to this point where I was being encouraged by other influencers in the space to say, Eric, You're worth $100,000 a year. Don't settle for anything less. I said, you know what? Thanks. I appreciate that. I'm going to go shoot for that. And then what I realized that is if you start shooting for that, profit over or cash over king, then you sacrifice a little bit of what drives you to go do the work. And I felt like I was moving in this direction to make my sponsors happy, to have them sign up for another year. And I was losing the ability to do like real journalistic, to stay in one community, to go deep, to use word of mouth, to find people to make an example of. So, and the other part of this too, in terms of that world, that marketing, that media world, have you ever heard the expression in terms of marketing, whoever spends the most money wins? I'm finding myself promoting companies that are already the winners in this space because they have the budget to sponsor my podcast. And when you start learning about the effects of technology and over history, the role technology has had in shaping culture, and the rich get richer, whoever controls the printing press, whoever controls the media outlets, whoever controls the mill, the like food as politics, right? Whoever controls the newest technology controls the narrative, controls the agenda. And I found myself in this position where I could see that happening. And I'm like, I'm promoting these companies that are already number one in their field. What happens about for number two and number three, who are maybe just as good? Like I'm talking too much, but like, do you see my conundrum?
Yeah. I think that one of the things that I'm hearing that's a thread through this is something that I struggle with, and it's patience. And the reason I say that is you have done an incredible job throughout the years of not quote unquote selling out. And people think that just because you make money, oh, well, he's selling out or this, that, and the other thing. You see it in bands a lot, right? But the reality is success is very much a snowball. But what they don't tell you is that snowball can move 1,000 miles a second, and it also can move at a snail's pace.
Yeah, it can also hit a wall and explode.
Yep. And I think we've all been there, right? Yeah. Anytime that you've been an entrepreneur for more than 6 months, probably you've hit, various snowball destruction. I will say, though, that when you build that momentum and you're resting on your laurels or the things that are important to you, that stuff, the universe opens up. Like, the universe is a lot like water, right? Like, it carves and moves. Your job isn't to stop it. Your job isn't to dam it up. Your job is to say that sometimes it's going to be a trickle, sometimes it's going to be a waterfall.
Right. And I think at the core of my message, I think the answer to what we're discussing is balance. And I think it's being conscious and aware of where you're putting your time and energy. And these tools that are here to serve us are also here to control and manipulate us. And I think we really have to be aware of that. Like, are we in a death scroll? Are we choosing to give our attention to cat videos and big boobs, or like literally, like, that's like how you're not going to stop and look at that when you're scrolling? Like, wow, like, right. I don't need more of that in my life. You know what I'm saying? Like, hate to be crude, but like those things are optimized to distract us.
Yeah.
And I think we don't educate people enough on saying, like, okay, like, there are all these, like, choose to look at media like you choose to look at food. Choose the healthier thing. Choose to like lift yourself up. How are you guys doing on time? Do I need to wrap things up?
You doing good? We're doing great.
Okay, I'm gonna try to give you an exit out, man, because I want to respect your time. This is, I truly love talking to you because you get me psyched up.
Thanks, insane.
But before we wrap up, any other thoughts you have that you want to get out that did not come out today?
God, we're gonna need to do part 2.
Yeah, I know you mentioned you want to talk about food. Do you have to get going? Tell me.
Not at all. John's
you
here.
Sure? Okay, cool. You wanted to talk about appropriation over appreciation. I want to make sure you get that out.
Yeah. So when I first started this, one of the most challenging things, and when I say this, exploring Indian food from a more public level, right? I've studied it for 16 years. Most of it was just, I'd cook staff meal for some of the crew at Greenleaf, and it would be like, oh, here's something I'm thinking for culture. We're going to do this butter chicken empanada. That's not Indian food. But as I started to branch out, especially after finding and spending time with Kurush, I had a lot of haters in the beginning. And it was really hard. People would say, you you're appropriating our food. And people would get so mad. And I would say, you can't appropriate food. And I never expounded upon that. And then they would be like, are you kidding? You know, if you made a dosa, like that dosa is appropriation because of X, Y, and Z. Like you didn't grow up with this. And so I struggled with it. And I asked Kurush one day over a video call. I was like, I don't know what to do. Like I kind of want to quit. Like, because I don't want, like, man, all I can say is I just didn't want to disrespect anyone. Like like that's just to my core, right? Like I didn't want to. But I also had this passion. He looks at me and he said, all food is appropriated. You can't appropriate food. If by definition, appropriation is to take without getting permission, you have my permission. And as he started to unravel the layers of this, I started realizing something very quick and simple in its nature. All food is appropriation. If you think of, name one thing in Indian food that you love. Anything.
Curry.
Cool. Curry. Let's say that curry has vegetables in it, right? And in that vegetable, you have carrots. Well, carrots aren't from the subcontinent. They were brought there in the 16th century.
Yeah, like what about potatoes in Ireland, right?
Yeah, potatoes don't come from the subcontinent. What's one of the hallmarks of Indian food? Spiciness, right? Well, one of those hallmarks, and that's not categorically true, but the chili pepper, that doesn't belong to India.
Was it Chile by any chance?
Yes-ish, but you can look at like Mexico and that whole region, right? Like you look at those things, and the word chili gets confused with pepper all the time, which is a fun story to come back to someday. But by nature, a lot of the things that India eats is not from India. Tomatoes that go in your curry.
South America.
Not at all from India.
Right.
So at what point do we look at food and say, well, India's appropriating it? And the reason we say these things is because when we look at food from a historical context, India didn't ask for colonialism. They didn't ask to be colonized. They weren't like, please colonize us. But what they did so remarkably well is take something that they knew, spices, black pepper. They took dal, lentils. They took bajra, which is a pearl millet, and they created this symphony of food that changed the world. So much so that curry powder is not from India. The British invent curry powder to take that flavor back home. So when you go into an Indian household in India and you go, hey, where's the curry powder? There's no curry powder. It's just blends. Masala just means spice blend. So we can't appropriate food because food doesn't belong to anyone. Mm-hmm. We can certainly disrespect food.
Right.
We can certainly not give it its merit. If I make dosa and I say, oh, well, this is just an Eastern pancake that I'm going to put maple syrup on. Well, that's, you're making it shitty at that point.
Well, it's back to the politics of food, right? Where you were saying food was a political power. Like, we are all entitled to what comes from this earth naturally, that grows from this earth. It's like you can't label that. I mean, if anything, I hear 100% everything you're saying, and I agree. And I think also if you pause and you think like, okay, well, what happens in 100 years from now when the world becomes so cross fertilized, or what's like, or just like we are not going to be 100% anything. Even if you look, I think even 23andMe is identifying that right now too. If you thought you were Italian, I'm from Sicily. I'm Sicilian. How many people came through Sicily over the past, 1,000 years? Like, we are moving in a direction of globalization in this mass mix. And I think that's part of our salvation, is we won't really start to think of ourselves as separate until we are literally all the same. So that idea of culture is going to eventually bleed. You're seeing it happen. Like, think about like a Boston accent. Like, do you think there's going to be a Boston accent in 50 years? Like, accents are going away. Like, we're all becoming globalized. Yeah. It's inevitable. So this has been a lot of fun. Any other things you want to get out now? Promotions, awareness about work you're doing? You have a documentary coming too. That's exciting. Are you still working on that? Yeah,
we've been working on that for a couple of years, all about just how I found India and going through stages of grief, exploring different emotions from grief and food to joy in food and how that's celebrated, and really why I started this journey.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much. A couple questions. I mean, I asked you some of these questions the last time I was here, but one thing I'm just curious about. The mission statement is to change the world by inspiring, empowering, transforming the industry. I think we're going to do that by sharing stories of individual change and transformation. So how are you better today since the last time I spoke to you?
I'm better not only because I chose to confront a lot of my own demons, but I'm better because the people I've had in my life for the last 4 years are just the best people I've ever met.
I love that, man. So I find the majority of my guests through having my current guests call out people they respect and admire, people who are doing it right, who are taking care of their staff, who are fiscally responsible, making money, making an impact. I want to get Chris Viaud back on the show. I think it would be great to pick up where we left off. I know a lot has happened for him in the past 4 years. But who else do you respect and admire in the industry? Somebody who is doing it right.
I am so excited for this one. I need you to go to New York, and I need you to meet Chintan Pandya. And Chintan is the chef over at Dhamaka. He won James Beard in 2022, I want to say, as best chef in New York City. He's changing the landscape of Indian cuisine in America, and I do not say that lightly. And his story and the person he is, not only is he going to be a great guest, he's one of my dear friends.
Ooh, so you can make it happen.
Yeah, I got this for you. Chintan, we're coming for you.
Chintan, look out. I'd love to get you on the show. And if we want to check out your books or we want to connect, ask questions about how we can too chase our passion and use our business to make that happen, what's the best way to connect?
Super easy, KeithSarasin.com.
Beautiful. This is episode 1144. If there's any tool or service or your books, we'll try to link in the show notes as well. If you want to check out those books, just head over, scroll down, any player, iTunes, Spotify, all the notes are right there. Just use your thumb, scroll down, and we'll have it there. Chef, thank you so much for taking the time to share your perspectives, your knowledge, your transformation. There is no questioning, my man. You are unstoppable.